We'll go ahead and get started with the February 13th regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners. If you would, please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Silence. Thank you. To the agenda, one minor change, item C1, approval of the minutes. I've asked that to be removed because there were some things that were missing in there, votes and the like, and some corrections that need to be made, so they'll be brought back at the next meeting. And just a point of clarity, not a change, but on new business item 1, the intent is to discuss and make adjustments to the resolution, and on appointments we are going to hold off on anything related to the Organizational Advisory Board until we have the full-blown work session and meeting in March. But beyond that, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Public comments. Diana Ayers.
Good evening. My name is Diana Ayers. I live at 8808 Anklin Forest Drive. As a resident of Waxhaw, even if it has been only for 5.5 years, I appreciate the work the commissioners and other members of the various branches of government have done. Although I don't always agree with the timing or decisions, I did vote for your representation. My concern, though, is the transparency that seems to be the buzzword today or lately. But for me, it is discussion by our manager, Greg Ferguson, who isn't here, and commissioners to bring
He's right there.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you sat there, sorry. Might be available, let me start over. Discussions by our manager and commissioners to bring ideas, items that might be available for residents' input before decisions are formulated and voted on. If we knew why most of our commissioners voted for, example, the shelter and activity playground set in a floodplain, or why the need for a new expense for leaf and yard disposal, or how we thought our roads could handle a community college in a residential area, or whether the promised parks would be truly in works and not just another study. It would have helped avoid heated feelings and misunderstandings. We need communication from all who represent us. We also need you as our representatives, not only to get info from the residents, but that you attend workshops, seminars, and meetings with other areas to pool ideas that others might have found useful in a situation that would be similar to ours. I know that this time spent with others in other government jurisdictions might take time out of your days, but it is something I and others appreciate from our officials taking part in. Please make yourselves available to other discussions to be most effective representatives here in Waxhaw. We know that some of you are already doing this extra mile and hope all will continue, and that we will take part, and that all will take part in future meetings others than our own city, and share this with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim Bagdasarian.
Hi, my name's Tim Bagdasarian. I live at 8920 Red Barone Place here in Waxhaw. I appreciate you guys letting us speak tonight. Before I get started, I just have a comment. I guess, Steve, you had mentioned at the beginning, though, that the minutes that were on the agenda will not be entered into record, and a bulk of my comments are about those minutes. So I'm not sure if I should wait or I can just go ahead and...
Either or.
Okay, all right, then I'll, since I'm here, I'll speak.
Yeah.
One of the things, though, first, before I get to that is, I do want to thank a few people that are sitting on the board here. You know, there's a couple of commissioners that have encouraged me over the last year to get involved, whether it's standing up to speak here or in our own community. So for that, I just want to thank Fred Burrell and Commissioner McMillan. And I think without that encouragement, I don't think I would have had the courage to have a desire to approach this podium and actually speak and stand up for what I believe in. So I want to thank you guys for that. You know, and as I move into the public comments, and it's really to address the meeting minutes from January 9th. I read those minutes online yesterday, and I really debated whether I was going to come and speak here tonight or not. And what struck me is that the comments that were made based on my comments that needed to be corrected, quite frankly, I don't believe that the comments that were made by this board to correct the minutes are actually correct. And I say that because if we look at the meeting minutes, you talk about there's no legal requirement, there's no legal timeline to post meeting minutes. And I find that interesting that you don't have to post meeting minutes, and you're absolutely correct. I couldn't find anything online that requires you to post meeting minutes. I can't find a law. But what's interesting is that you continue to, somebody goes on, I don't know who wrote the minutes, but you also state that the video serves as a medium until those meeting minutes are posted and entered into record, right? And if I look at the town website, when I go to the townofwaxhaw.com, and that's where, as a citizen, I should go to get my information. So if I pull up the link for the Board of Commissioners, I should see every meeting that has occurred, the agenda that's posted, the video link that should be posted, and also the meeting minutes. And as I went through that, over the course of, I don't know, a year in, I should say 13 months, if I look back all the way to January 10th, 2017, on the town website, we're missing 7 videos. So I can't look at the videos in lieu of meeting minutes not being posted. So I'm really looking for more clarity and more transparency and openness. If I'm not here to attend these meetings, I need a place to go to see that information. And so as we talk about the minutes,
Would you be willing to share the specifics with our manager so we can get underneath why those particular meetings are missing? Just
yeah, absolutely.
efforts. Thank you.
I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
But you know, as the comment was made about there's no legal requirement to post those meeting minutes. If I look at, and I go to the town website and I find the 2017 Board and Commission Orientation Manual, it states in here, it talks about the general rules of order, board structure. It sets a precedent of basic procedures to follow. It talks about the basic meeting order that the town clerk's office that should be preparing those minutes. There's a draft copy that's recorded, and then once the draft is finalized, it'll be entered into the record. It gives a basic meeting order where within the minutes, meeting minutes should be entered into record from the previous meeting. And to me, it's almost unbelievable that from the October timeframe of 2017, almost 7 meetings had passed, and not once did anyone consider that we're missing meeting minutes to enter into the record. You read the agenda every meeting. Up until October 24th, you had been entering meeting minutes into the record. But after October 24th, for a period of almost 14 weeks, nothing was entered. I don't know how that could be missed. It's basic rules of procedure. This town record references, you know, different procedural documents, Robert's Rules of Orders, procedures to follow, and it doesn't seem like it's being followed. It seems like there's policies that are and procedures that are set in place, yet there's no oversight for this board. And I question who's actually overseeing the policies that this board is supposed to be following. And in your document, it says that the meeting preparation, purpose, and content, and I'm just highlighting here, but that's in here. The law requires that all minutes be full and accurate. The purpose of the minutes is to provide a record of actions taken by a public body and not provide a transcript of that whole back and forth, right? So we get that, and that's what the meeting minutes are doing. But it says, you know, draft and adopted minutes. Draft minutes shall be clearly labeled, stamped as draft. Board shall post draft minutes in draft form on the website via iCompass. It's something internal, I assume. Within 1 week of the meeting, the draft minutes will be replaced by the approved minutes upon approval, which should occur at the board's next regular meeting. That is what Mr. Ferguson told me in December of 2017 out at Anklin Forest when I first raised the issue. Meeting minutes are posted every 2 weeks. So we get back to 7 meetings worth of minutes, 14 weeks weren't posted. So the meeting minutes that were going to be entered into record, I think need to be corrected, or it should be clarified to remove this. There's no legal requirement to post meeting minutes, because I feel that's simply not true. It contradicts what Mr. Ferguson is stating to the public. If he speaks to the public, he is always representing this board and the town. All of you are when you speak out in public. It's not clear. And I also would recommend that I think it was at the board retreat that you presented at, it was in one of the agendas about board policy and procedures, and I think something should be updated to that document that talks about meeting minutes as to when they're posted, what are they posted for? Is it just for the Board of Commissioners' regular meeting? Should they be posted for all of the work sessions? And should they be posted for the board retreat? If it's a public meeting where an agenda is made available, then I would expect as a citizen that meeting minutes would also be made available. So we all have a record and know what's being discussed and decisions that are being made. Thank you.
Thank you. Polly Hefner, or Patty Hefner?
No, it's Polly.
Polly? Okay.
Hello, I'm Polly Hefner. I live at 1625 Great Road. I moved from Deerfield Plantation about a year ago, and now I'm on Great Road. And so I'm still in Waxhaw, and I'm still very much in love with Waxhaw. But there are a lot of changes taking place, and I think I'm up here just to plead with you to be completely open about things that are done in our town and to support our citizens, and for the citizens to understand that we like to have a town that is pedestrian and bike friendly, but there were a lot of businesses here before all of the residents, and I'm afraid that we're not going to have the same amount of tug as some of the new people think they should have. All right. For example, I can't really understand the widening 3 choices that were given on my website in Lawson. They said, tell your representative to vote for 2. I looked at 2, and I thought, if I have that there, that means if somebody wants to turn left out of a drive, okay, I don't think I made it clear that I also have a business on Providence Road, or at least a piece of property that is used as a business at Breed Karate Academy. So if I get out of my driveway and try to turn left now, it's almost impossible. And if I vote for plan number 2, I feel I'm going to have to possibly drive across a sidewalk that's used for biking and walking, and then 2 more lanes of traffic to make a left. It's kind of similar, for those of you who know Food Line. It's trying to make a left-hand turn out of Food Line, except in addition, I have a blind grade. So I know you're going to be talking to DOT, and I wanted it to be on record that I'm very concerned about that area at Pine Oak, Prescott, and Reed's Karate Academy. I'm concerned about being able to get parents onto the road safely. And I'm not exactly sure what the answer is, but I would like to have my Board of Commissioners representing all of us in Waxhaw, and I hope that you would stand up for any business that has been here for a long, long time and has never had a problem with getting in and out of its property before. Another problem that has developed along Highway 16 is Deerfield and Cooper Business Park. One of the reasons I moved away from Deerfield was I could never make a left-hand turn to get into town. And if somebody's coming out of Cooper Business Park, it's almost impossible. There's no rule about who's going to go and when. Additionally, there are a lot more SUVs on the road, and it's harder to see traffic. If you've ever been at Food Line and tried to turn left, and an SUV comes over and blocks your view, you can't see right. So there are a lot of traffic issues, and I hope that you have a commitment to work with the public and to work with the DOT to make sure that people who have made Waxhaw a lifelong home have made a good decision.
Thank you. Candace, definis.
Good evening. My name is Candace definis. I live at 8313 Willow Branch Drive in Waxhaw. Tonight I wanted to reinforce some comments that I made previously, that I think it's of the utmost importance that the board work on updating our Unified Development Ordinance and make that a priority. That we develop the Unified Development Ordinance that supports the citizens of Waxhaw. The citizens of Waxhaw have spoken in the past months of many ways, formats, outlining how they feel. The citizens survey that was discussed previously had 3 top things that the citizens of Waxhaw were concerned about: traffic and congestion in Waxhaw, also the infrastructure of Waxhaw, and thirdly, park space in Waxhaw. As many of you know, park space is near and dear to my heart, and I've asked repeatedly that we find a way to conserve the park space that we have, whether it be on our active list or our inactive list. Approximately 60 acres of park space, approximately, because I don't know the exact number, are on our inactive park space today. I would ask this board to please give heavy consideration to conserving the park spaces that we have, whether they be on the active or inactive list. I would ask this board also to look at the park spaces that we currently have today and also budget that we would be able to have a passive park for all residents of Waxhaw to enjoy. I think it is absolutely clear that our citizens have reached out and that we have asked that these 3 top concerns be addressed. I believe that the citizens of Waxhaw, that is our town, our home, our community, and we need to stand together to ensure the future of our town, that we need to protect its charm, its quality of life, and that we need to help and make sure that we protect the home that we all decided to choose and make here. So again, much like the previous comments, I would ask that you would take consideration to the traffic and congestion that was outlined in the citizen survey, to the infrastructure needs that were outlined in the citizen survey, and to the park needs that were outlined in the citizen survey. I would also ask that we do take laser focus, an absolute laser focus to updating our UDO, and that we kickstart that process again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the modified consent agenda, which is basically everything except item 1.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next up, Ms. Jill Conley from Ginger Snap.
Jill Connolly. I live at 9712 Chimera Drive in Waxhaw, and I'm the race director for Ginger Snap 5K. I want to introduce a few people to everybody. This is Bonnie Grote. She's the director of Girls on the Run in Union County. Ginger Snap 5K is the direct in Lonnie. Girls on the Run in Union County is the direct beneficiary for the Ginger Snap 5K. If you're not familiar with the race, it is an annual 5K event that takes place in downtown Waxhaw the first Saturday in December every year. This year we celebrate our 8th annual event, and all of our proceeds directly benefit this awesome cause in Union County.
Jill?
So I'd like them to say
Could you hold the microphone so the people at home can hear?
which one?
Either one.
All right, this one looks easier to get off.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So I'd like for Bonnie and Lonnie to just kind of explain to you guys a little bit about the program, because there's a lot of misconceptions about Girls on the Run and the impact that it has in our local community.
Hi guys. Well, Girls on the Run of Union County, we're in our 12th season. Bonnie started it, and we give about over $30,000 in scholarships for girls to participate 3rd through 8th grade in the program. It's a character education program that has the word running in it, but it's more about self-esteem, positive living, and they use running for the girls to be able to complete a goal. So to have the town of Waxhaw, to have Connolly Orthodontics and Novant support the Ginger Snap 5K and having us as the beneficiary, it is, we can't put into words how much it means to us that we can provide this program for girls that could not afford it. It's one of our major funding opportunities, and we're just so, so, so grateful. Did you want to say anything?
I would just right along with Lonnie is thank you so much for opening the town to us. We couldn't make the race without the help of the town, Connolly, Jill especially, everyone. It's a town effort, and we hear nothing but praises. And I want to just thank you for the support, and it really is helping a lot of young girls with their self-esteem and girls that aren't able to do things like this. The proceeds from the race, no one's ever turned away. So in 12 years, we have not turned one person down that couldn't do it due to financial. I mean, the whole main thing is to help in the Title I schools or to really any families that are in need of financial assistance. So thank you.
So obviously it's through our support of sponsors. So I have brought with me my husband. This is Dr. Connolly. So it's Connolly Orthodontics, not only the race director, but we also financially contribute as the presenting sponsor. And then I have the fine folks here, next door neighbors in the parking lot, Novant Health. They are our supporting sponsor, and together we make this race awesome. So I want to thank them for coming. They came to help me present the check to Bonnie and Lonnie this year. Thank you. So this year, with much ado, we were able to raise $24,000 to go back into the program. So, and I would love to get Mayor Mahar up here and see if we could get a photo opportunity. The town of Waxhaw greatly supports this. It helps us. Lisa's not here tonight. Lisa and her crew really put the event together for us. I wouldn't be able to make this entire race happen without the support of the town, and you guys have always been so gracious opening your doors to us and tolerating us for those 4 hours on Saturday morning. So thank you. We had just under about 700 girls participate in the program for the fall season, and we had, for time participants, we broke a record. This was our biggest season for participants. We had 1,038 time participants on top of the 700 girls for Girls on the Run, plus their parents, spectators, and volunteers. We had well over about 21 to 2,200 people in downtown Waxhaw for the event this year. So it's really big. It's great because it brings people right into the heart of downtown, get them to see the community, get excited about Waxhaw. So it really is, it's a great event, fun family event. This is my daughter, Ellie, who is my second child to run through the program. So we brought her here with her finisher's medal as well to represent the Girls on the Run crowd. That is. I'm ready. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Come on, you guys. Come. How are you? You get back. It's so tall. I know. I gotta figure out the new ring.
Thank you. Commissioner reports. Commissioner Burrow.
This past Sunday, I was privileged to attend a celebration of the African History Month. And I was able to go with the mayor and the mayor pro tem. And my impression coming away from that was that this was a group of the most decent people I had ever met. It was at the new Living Word congregation out on Old Broom Road. And they were a group of people committed to each other, to their families, to their community. And quite frankly, it was very refreshing. It's something that be good for all of us to learn. Thank you.
Commissioner Westlake.
Okay. First of all, I was a Girls on the Run coach a couple years ago at Kensington, so it's a wonderful program. I highly recommend it for any of you that have girls, and I am not a runner, so any of you can help coach. I know they're always looking for volunteers. Let's see, last week, Commissioner McMillan and I attended the Central Carolina Council of Governments meeting. We learned a little bit about grant writing, and I'm real excited about how we talked about working on a plan for public transportation, which I think is going to be great to coincide with the CRPTO representatives to work on the traffic side. So I think that's something both things we should be doing to work for the future. Also attended a couple of ribbon cuttings, Top Flight Insurance Agency, and Welts Antiques and More downtown. So I think it's really exciting that we've got a couple of new businesses opening up. There's 2 more ribbon cuttings coming up this month. So I think that's very exciting for Waxhaw to have all these small businesses opening up. So please go check them out. And that's all I have.
Commissioner Lee.
Yes, just a few remarks. Since we last were here, we had our town retreat. That was definitely an eye-opener, I think, for a lot of us. I was disappointed to find out after the fact that it wasn't recorded, and many of you didn't even know you were welcome to come, so I hope that we will get that figured out for next time, spread the word that you're welcome. I know that it was full of some very interesting discussions. It was certainly interesting to find out what we all prioritize, where we agree and where we differ. And recently, I was lucky enough to have a wonderful time at the Union County Chamber of Commerce elected officials reception. Had some great conversations with our counterparts in our sister cities, and even at the county level, some of the county commissioners. I know that our town's interactions with our county level counterparts have not always been positive, not in the past, and sometimes not even recently, but I think that reaching out and forming those cooperative, positive relationships is definitely going to be key to helping Waxhaw be the best that we can be. And I've been blessed recently to speak with many residents who've reached out to me with concerns and questions. We all know that there can be quite a, as Jimmy Buffett would say, coconut telegraph that goes on in town. Lots of rumors swirl, lots of misinformation gets out, so I was very happy with the residents who reached out to me that I was able to talk to them, listen to their concerns, and sometimes correct some of the misinformation. And lastly, these past couple of days have been very busy and joyous for my family. My oldest boy turned 7 on Saturday, and my youngest turned 4 today.
Commissioner Burns.
I also attended the elected officials reception, and just briefly want to thank the Union County Chamber of Commerce for putting that on every year. It's an interesting time to talk to different chamber members and also municipality elected officials in other towns. It was an interesting time, and thank you to the Chamber of Commerce. There's one other thing that is on my mind, and I guess on my heart, is everyone has watched on television or heard on the news about the police officers that have been murdered in this country, across this country, week after week after week. And it just boggles my mind. But I think when I look at that, and I think how fortunate we are and how lucky we are to have the police officers and the staff that we have in this town to protect us. We love you guys. I love you guys. And it's just to protect us and some things that even I've gone through personally in the past year, that they were right there to help me, to protect me, to reassure me that they were there and watching to get me through a hard time. So thank you very much. Bobby, I think you're the only one here, but thank you all for what you do for this town. We really appreciate it. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Am I on? Okay.
Yes, you are.
Good. Okay. I have, over the past 2 weeks, since our last meeting, taken part in several workshops and meetings with other municipalities. As Commissioner Westlock has already stated, we did attend the Central Iowa Council of Government, which we received a ton of information on transportation, grants, other projects, other opportunities, learning opportunities, and training opportunities. I will be taking part, let's see, Candace. I will be taking part with the grant writing workshop on February 20th, which will be held in Charlotte at COG. Anyone who needs additional information about that, I'd be more than happy to give that to you. I also attended the elected officials reception with Commissioner Lee and Commissioner Burns, which was also very well attended, where we met numerous officials from other municipalities. Even today, I was meeting with other officials from municipalities, the Mayor of Mineral Springs, and some other officials from Monroe that I did speak with today. In addition, I've attended training workshops for disaster preparedness workshop, preparing us for disasters in the event that something happens in our town or community. I've shared that with our town manager. There's a volunteer transportation services program that COG is also trying to implement, which I've also shared with our town manager. I have had my first meeting with citizens at the Duncan McDonald House, met with a number of citizens, and had, I think, a very good dialogue and exchange with them. I've also met with citizens at Provisions throughout the week to talk to them and get a feel for what is going on in the town, what their concerns are, and what, they would like to see happen in our town. I have said that I'm going to also open up meetings with the citizens on Saturdays. For those who are interested, the first one will be Saturday, February 24th, and I will be there from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. In March, I will have a day meeting and also an evening meeting. For those who cannot come during the day, there will be a meeting in the evening, and I will continue doing that as long as citizens would like me to do that and they want me to come out, then I will make myself available to you. In addition, I will also be attending training series with, again, the Council of Government that will be COG University, which is also training you with information regarding region planning, businesses, nonprofits, information regarding transit, transportation, and other writing plans that can be brought back to the town. And lastly, I did attend the Faith Information Black History Month program, as was stated, and that was very, very good experience, and met with some other faith leaders here in the town as well.
Well, I'll try to simplify it, since, yes, I was at the elected officials, yes, I was at New Living Word. I want to echo something, just go a little bit further on something Commissioner Burns said. In addition to thanking the Chamber, thank you to one of our power companies, Union Power Co-op, because they were the sponsor of the elected official night. There was a tremendous turnout, and like Commissioner Lee said, you get an opportunity to talk with a lot of different people in a very informal environment and really find out about where the common issues are and where there's differences, for that matter. and where you can collaborate. I echo the same comments that Commissioner Burns has about our police department. On a personal basis, they have helped me out as well in some situations that you really don't know that they provide those kinds of services, and they really dig deep and try to help. I've had the privilege of doing a ride-around and to watch how they operate and how professional they are and how well-trained they are, and that's a testament to the town manager and the budgeting process that we go through. They're very, very well-trained. Welcome the 2 new businesses, Weltus Antiques and More on Main and Top Flight. In addition, I attended the winter meeting of the Mayor's Association of North Carolina. If anybody is out there that thinks we're not going to continue to grow, and if anybody doesn't think there's a need for us to have a legislative agenda that's unique to Waxhaw in the region, we had the professor from North Carolina State who actually is the input system to economic development for North Carolina. The Commerce Department generates the incentives, and really some interesting perspectives. Union County, 70% growth through 2050. That's right, 70%. Contrast that, though, with 25% of the counties will lose population, and 50% of the municipalities will continue to lose population. So the need for a uniqueness for Waxhaw and what we do with the legislature becomes real critical. A good kudo for Waxhaw. One of the biggest gaps that's out there is in the middle paid jobs. People don't think $70,000 is an adequate salary. Hats off to the Apprentice Academy that is opening up come August 1st here in Waxhaw, the charter school led by Barry Ross. That's going after that particular audience and trying to encourage high school kids to develop those skills and then move on through a community college or whatever as they move forward. And to the traffic and traffic congestion, you're going to love this. The #1 issue is the people that sit behind the wheel, and so the state's actively looking at autonomous vehicles to try to regulate the traffic, and if that doesn't work, they're really looking at congestion fees. So anybody driving into Charlotte would have to pay a fee to drive on the road. So they can't build the roads fast enough. They don't have the money, and so they're starting to look at all these things as they move forward. Lastly, I just want to congratulate again Jill Conley and Ginger Snap. I have a blast volunteering, even if it does mean you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and show up, but you guys do a great job, and it really is an example of how a volunteer organization can really work with the town to pull off a very good event in the town. So with that, Mr. Ferguson.
Yes, budget season is well underway. The departments are currently working on their budget requests and the justification for those requests. The first work session for the board comes up on March 27th, and that'll be a fairly jam-packed work session for you. We'll have a couple updates there as far as bringing in the folks from Davenport and Company to talk about financing and financing options in North Carolina, so look forward to that.
With that, we will go to some old business. Highway 16, a typical section recommendation. Mr. Rory, you're going to follow up with what was presented at our work session January 23rd.
All right, I'm Dennis Rory, Development Services Director, Town Engineer. Like the Mayor said, this is largely a follow-up to a presentation that I gave maybe 2 weeks ago at a work session about the Highway 16 cross-section, and specifically a recommendation that I made at the time at the work session, or at least prepped you all for the recommendation I was going to make tonight, which is the same cross-section. But very quickly, before I get into the details, just wanted to give a little bit of context about why I'm up here and why I'm making the request, or the recommendation rather. And this is largely in response to NCDOT's Highway 16 widening project that will span from Ray Road to Waxhaw Parkway. The project's scheduled to go into right-of-way acquisition phase in fiscal year 2021 to be more specific. And before Thanksgiving, NCDOT approached Union County and the affected municipalities along the corridor, that's the town of Weddington, the village of Marvin, and the town of Waxhaw, and solicited our feedback on what our desired cross-section would be for this particular corridor. So each individual municipality along with the county had an opportunity to give input, and so the county has already taken a vote. They have made one recommendation. The village of Marvin actually is it's on their agenda for tonight, if I'm not mistaken, and the town of Weddington, they made a recommendation in December, and I think their recommendation was for what is known as option 1 in your presentation packet. I'll get to it. Union County also made a recommendation for option 1, and again, the village of Marvin, it's on their agenda for tonight, just like it is here in Waxhaw. So I wanted to give that context so everyone who may have missed the presentation that I gave a couple of weeks ago kind of got a condensed version. But to get kind of straight to the recommendation, I apologize that these are in kind of different order than maybe is easy to interpret, but the graphic, and much like I stated a couple of weeks ago, it's really a hand sketch that I'm recommending is what's called option 2, which would kind of contemplate 2 travel lanes in each direction, which are denoted by the 22 feet, a center median that you can see kind of sketched with 5-foot bike lanes on kind of either side of the median, along with on one side of the road a 12-foot shared use path, on the other side of the road a 6-foot sidewalk. So this was not a drawing that was done in the dark by any means. If I go back a slide, the graphics that you have in front of you are actually graphics from the Highway 16 corridor plan that was adopted several years by a different kind of composition of the board at that time, but it was adopted by the board nonetheless. And so it is shown in this upper left hand corner, and the fundamental differences between what you see in the upper left hand corner and what you see in this hand sketch, it's really the 5-foot bike lane. And so again, the reason why I'm sharing this graphic is just to let you know that more or less what we've done kind of on the staff side is tried to stay true to as much as we can to what the feedback has been through the various public processes that have occurred that have yielded kind of what at the time this particular Highway 16 corridor plan that was adopted said that it wanted. Now, not to confuse the issue, but there are several cross sections that you see. Those are for different portions along Highway 16. We looked at the feasibility of these different cross sections, and if you were to explore the details, you'll see that a couple of them aren't necessarily as feasible anymore given how our development patterns have changed. So moving forward, just a very kind of basic table to just show you the different options. Option 1, option 2, which again is what I'm up here recommending tonight, and then option 3, just to walk you through the table from left to right. The travel lanes for each option are the same. None of the options from kind of NCDOT contemplate the bike lane, so they're probably, you know, that could be a bike lane right there, but I showed it in the graphic. The 6-foot sidewalk, 12-foot shared use path, and then one of the things that's probably, I don't want to go as far as say most important, but is very important, is the different preliminary cost for each of the different options. And so regardless of what option the board ultimately recommends or votes on, there will be some cost to the town, and what we know right now are these three kind of line items of cost. And that's the 151, the 450, and the 812. And I did confirm with NCDOT earlier today that any town share for the sidewalk and shared use path, or any of those options rather, that cost would be due at project completion. So we're talking a maybe 2024, 2025 timeframe. And it's a part of their kind of project closeout procedures where they'll start basically invoicing the different municipalities and the county for whatever ultimately gets built by way of streetscape. And I covered this early on just to set the context, but this is more or less the schedule of kind of the adjacent municipalities along with the county and when they kind of took this issue up. I did not update this particular slide, but I covered it earlier in the presentation to say that tonight the Village of Marvin actually has it on their agenda for decision.
Any questions for Mr. Rory?
Have a few.
Commissioner Lee?
So if we're looking at all of 16 starting up at the freeway, up at Waverly, they have already now, that's option one basically what's up there, right? There's a sidewalk on each side, there's a planted median between the two double lanes.
Sort of. I would try not to compare that version, largely because from 45 to really Weddington, really 45 to Audrey Kell, a lot of that cross-section has been influenced by the different developments that have occurred on either side.
Okay.
So I'm just cautious not to compare the two, because what the original intent for the cross-section may have been from 45 to Audrey Kell, it's certainly changed and gotten bigger, quite frankly, with turn lanes due to Waverly. And what you'll see on the other side of 16 is Ray Farms, and you'll see that it's having some cross-section impacts as well.
But from Audrey Kell down to Ray,
That's option
basically one.
Yes, that's correct.
And then, correct me if I'm getting my geography wrong, from Ray Road right there, it picks up with Weddington's property? That's, okay, so they've decided to continue that same footprint
Sure.
coming down.
Sure.
At what point do we hit Marvin?
Newtown?
Newtown? Okay, I'm bad at, so.
A little bit before, but.
A little bit.
Yeah, it's right around, okay. So we're gonna have one coming down, and then whatever Marvin decides tonight, and then whatever we decide, yes?
And the county. The county has decided one, so there are places along the corridor that are within municipal limits, and some, the pieces of property could be directly next door or directly adjacent and are in unincorporated Union County. And their recommended cross-section was option one.
Will be one, okay. How much, what was the length of land that we're talking about here? How many miles, what are we talking about?
So the entire project corridor is about.
Our part of it.
Our part of it, so say a couple miles.
Couple miles, okay.
Why don't you give the percentage?
Well, so, I mean, 40% of basically 40% of the land area that's impacted along the corridor is comprised of Waxhaw.
Okay. Now, the estimates in your presentation for the town share and the total cost, those obviously don't include the cost of purchasing the right-of-ways.
That's correct.
What are we looking at? What's realistic here? If we go with option two, is it realistic to say $50,000, to say 200, you know?
For right-of-way?
Yeah.
I would not attempt to try to estimate that, largely because right-of-way cost can vary property to property based off of fair market values on estimates for property.
I understand that, but we have to estimate that when we make that decision. We have to calculate in our minds what could we be signing up to pay, because we can't start the project and then hit a resident, a homeowner, landowner that doesn't want to sell and suddenly change our minds, can we?
Well, I think NCDOT is going to do the right-of-way negotiations, but I do think at some point NCDOT will share with the town kind of the value of those negotiations. So I don't think that you're going to get an upfront, here's how much right-of-way is before they attempt to try to.
Of course, but I'm not an engineer. I don't know what's realm of reality here. What is, is it 400,000? I don't know what is a reasonable, logical
I think it'll be much more than the hundreds of thousands. I mean, it could over the entire corridor could largely be well over that.
So that 450 could what, double potentially, possibly?
Yeah, again, I mean, I'm not necessarily going to
I know you can't give us.
Yeah, I'm not going to try to estimate
I just need a bracket,
that.
you know.
I understand that, and unfortunately, I can't give you that bracket. I mean, that really, truly is going to be a project-level determination once NCDOT figures out how wide the cross-section is and how much right-of-way they need to acquire. And so if they don't know how much they need to acquire, you know, that's going to be something that they will have to answer once they kind of lock down a design. And a part of what we're giving them by way of information is to help them start to answer those questions.
If we were to choose option 2 tonight, and they were to begin that process of trying to start those negotiations, and that number did come back as 2 times that, would we be able to change our minds, or would we be locked in?
No, you'd be able to change your mind.
Okay, because that's a lot of money. We're talking about, I'm sorry, I'm not an engineer, so I do have questions.
Sure.
The sidewalks coming in on what option 1 that Union County is going to do, that Weddington is going to do, are 5 foot. The options on your option 2 are 6 foot. So we're going to have some very flowy sidewalks going on here where we go from county land to our land and back again. We're going to have just a section of potentially a bike lane or multi-use path from Bonds Grove to the Food Lion Shopping Center. Who do you think is the targeted demographic? Who's going to use this multi-use path? Who's this for?
I mean, well, a couple of things. One, I don't want to conclude based off of any recommendation tonight that's what we'll end up having. I think that,
of course,
right, but I think that's a pretty important point, because there certainly could be variations in terms of the recommendations between the town of Weddington, the county, Marvin, and the town of Waxhaw. However, I look at that as an opportunity to say, hey, how much coordination do you want to really have between the affected communities to try to get any form of consistency along the entire corridor? If that's important to the board, they can certainly take that up as an item to start the coordination process. So I just want to be careful to say that a recommendation somehow turns to
not a guarantee.
That's exactly what we're going to see. The users, I think the users of, whether it's a sidewalk, whether it's a shared use path, whether it's a bike lane, whether it's the road, it's the community at large. And so if we were to go back to this particular graphic from the Highway 16 corridor plan, which was adopted several years ago, it contemplated these same types of treatments. And so you see the 12-foot shared use path plan there. And so at the time, that's what the community said that they wanted, and it ultimately was placed into a plan. So that would be the end user. But a little bit more specifically, I think and I said this at the work session, an individual who chooses to use an in-road bike lane on their bike, that would be more of a committed cyclist. Someone who chooses to use the shared use path with their bike may be more of a recreational user and not necessarily using kind of the pavement in the same manner as a cyclist would use the pavement.
Other questions?
That's all my questions.
Wait, hang on a second. Who all has questions here? We'll start with Commissioner Westlake.
Question and statement. Just point of clarification for any that weren't here last time. If you could go back to your hand-drawn one. So even though on that graphic it said shared use pad, no bike lanes, you're showing that the 5 feet there is actually a bike lane,
That's
pretty much,
correct.
right?
That's
So I
correct.
just want the public to understand that we are talking about bike lanes, even though that wasn't on that other column graph there. Also, as I think you had pointed out last time, that experience has shown that it's best to ask for the moon, basically, when you're submitting ideas to DOT, and then we could back up if we determine it's too expensive?
Yeah, I mean, I think as maybe just a general kind of piece of feedback, whenever, maybe it's more specific actually, whenever outside entities like the DOT ask, what do you want? Certainly say what you want. Now, that may not ultimately be what gets built for a number of reasons. Financially, that's a constraint, and it's a real constraint that has to be considered. But if you kind of start with the minimums, it's much harder to get anything else. Right. And if you start kind of with what you want and then dial it back if you feel like that's appropriate as you get more information along kind of the project planning and design phases.
Okay. Just a statement. I'm going to go ahead and support option 2 tonight. I think we have seen in the way that how slow things happen with the DOT, that we need to be more forward-thinking. And in the future, having bike lanes seems to make sense. And I think that safety of citizens is important, and that's money well spent, and having those additional lanes available, you know, allows for more public safety.
Commissioner Burns?
I want to ask questions about the financial part
Sure.
of it. As far as the option 2 for the $450,000, I guess, Greg, what is the source of funding for that amount?
If the board move forward as that option 2, and I think reflecting on what Dennis says, if that continued to be the option that was embedded into the design, then staff would come back to the board with a recommendation as to how to set funds aside for that eventual bill that would be due. I think that the good news is that the bill would not be due until a later design year or completion year, so I think, as Dennis mentioned, you're looking at 2024 perhaps is when the final check would need to be cut. So there's ample time there to actually hear what the right-of-way costs might be and evaluate those right-of-way costs, and then determine, in addition to whatever the number is, and just to point out that there will be funds required with any of the 3 options. But based on what option is picked, and if that option survives the initial design phase, then we would actually have a recommendation as to how you would finance it.
Okay, and on option 2, if we go with the widening on one side, if that's built, who maintains that, the DOT or the town of Waxhaw?
So just quick clarification. So in any of the 3 options, I would anticipate widening on both sides of the
Right.
road. But sidewalk maintenance would fall onto the municipalities. Yeah, NCDOT typically doesn't perform sidewalk maintenance. The county typically doesn't either, so I think that's something they'll have to figure out as it relates to the properties that are in unincorporated Union County. And just kind of one thing, and maybe this is a detail, but maybe it's not, as we were talking about kind of the funding piece, what we're talking about is the town's share in really the sidewalk infrastructure, whether it's called a shared use path or just sidewalk. That's really what we're talking about by way of cost, and I just want to make that clear.
Could we just have some quiet from the audience, please? Continue.
Just want to make that clarification point so that we were all clear. That's the cost that we're talking about here, very, very specific cost.
Okay, so just doing the math in my mind, I'm looking at $151,000 with no right-of-way cost for Waxhaw in option 1. In option 2, $450,000, which is $299,000 more in cost. Adding on to what you told Commissioner Lee, it could be up to $200,000, $300,000, $400,000.
So
possibly, we don't know,
correct.
But it could be.
Correct.
Because
none of these have right-of-way cost associated with them in this table. So options 1, 2, or 3, right-of-way cost is not included, and whether it's 151, 450, or 812, all of those numbers are subject to change once the project details become really more vetted, more planned out by NCDOT.
But the option 1 is little or no right-of-way acquisition.
No, that's not necessarily true. I think in any of the 3 options, there will be right-of-way acquisition associated with the project.
Okay, well, in the minutes, it's, in the recommendations, I believe it said little to no for option one.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I would need to go back and check, but any of these three options is most likely going to require right-of-way acquisition, just for the road to be built. I would argue right-of-way acquisition will be needed just for the asphalt, for the travel lanes in a lot of cases.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Now, if we go with option 2, which is the recommendation right here, and we're talking more or less a different layout based upon bike lane paths that we would have on both sides of the road, and a little wider roadway with that option. So now what happens with the bike lane paths when we hit Marvin and Weddington and going through town? There's no more bike lanes, so we're only looking for bike lanes for the town of Waxhaw.
Yeah, and so I think that's kind of largely Commissioner Lee's point. What we're talking about tonight would be just for Waxhaw, and if other communities recommend something different, I think that there's an opportunity to start having dialogue with those other communities around what do we want to see comprehensively. Because otherwise, yes, we could have an outcome. I doubt it would get built this way, but there could be 3 or 4 different design recommendations. But before something gets built, one would have to truly get decided. And so I think that one that gets decided could certainly involve conversations between all other parties that are along this corridor.
So with Union County having pockets that are already here in Waxhaw, and we go with option 2, they've already formulated option 1, how does that fit? You know, I know Commissioner Lee asked that, but I'm trying to visualize, how is that going to fit in the scheme of pattern through the town? Yeah. And who's going to maintain option 2 versus option 1 if we go with option 2 when the county has option 1 in certain pockets?
So I think anything within the town limits, the town is going to be required to maintain, whether it's option 1, 2, or 3. Anything in the town limits, the sidewalk, the maintenance responsibility would fall onto the town. The asphalt for the road, the maintenance responsibility would fall on NCDOT. The same under option 1 for the county. I'm not sure who's going to maintain the sidewalk for the county, because the county doesn't maintain sidewalks, and NCDOT typically does not maintain sidewalks either. So I think that's a conversation that the county and NCDOT are going to have to figure out together on what does maintenance look like. However, in terms of the different designs, and I said this I think at the work session, yeah, 3 or 4 different designs, it would not look very good on paper. But just to reiterate what I said a few moments ago, I don't think I don't think 3 or 4 different designs would get built. I think that there would be a level of consistency that would be forced, quite frankly, throughout the project design when someone lays it out on paper and says, I think you guys need to decide on a compromise on what works along this corridor from some starting point to some ending point. And some of that's not known, quite frankly, because we're not controlling the project decisions.
And just to be clear, Marvin's voting tonight. They would prefer to go after option 2 just to get it priced. And the county has already said if we have Waxhaw and Marvin and you got a little bit of county piece in the middle, we got to work with you to get consistency, to your point. They've already said that. So to your point, nobody's locked in other than Weddington, and that's consistent with what they started from at the county line all the way up, and that's what they wanted to do. So do you have more questions?
I just have problems with the consistency issue that's going on, because if Weddington is already locked in with the county, Marvin possibly will vote for option 2, we don't know. And if we were to vote for option 2 and they still need to have consistency going through the town with the development of it. Now, we vote for option 2. with a significant price increase that we're looking at now, and I know we're talking vision and what's going to happen in 7, 8, 10 years down the line, but that significant cost to the town can be a concern as to how that's going to be paid, but also visually as to how the impact and the structure is going to be laid out from Waxhaw through Marvin, through Weddington. So I'm trying to understand why option 2 then is more of a recommended choice than option 1, and if that is just because it gives us a wider option, if it's because it was consistent with a plan that was looked at maybe, I don't know how many years ago?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Is that still something that is good for the town today? And why do we need bike lanes down Providence Road through Waxhaw, you know, when we don't have bike lanes already down Providence Road? And how is that going to impact when we consistently try to get through the other towns who may not have those same bike lanes?
Yeah, I mean, so I think kind of multiple questions. You know, part of it is, I think if you were to look at our comprehensive plan and some of the statements that the community made in our own comprehensive plan about, you know, kind of how to accommodate cyclists, I would argue we haven't done a very good job of that so far, and so we have very limited opportunities, in my opinion, to do that, and so this happens to be one of those opportunities. And so kind of reaching back to the comprehensive plan, also reaching to the Highway 16 corridor plan to at some level of kind of visioning statement about what we said we wanted at some point. One thing that I did not bring up here, because it wasn't necessarily relevant, but happy to share it, is that according to NCDOT's own Complete Streets policy, largely what we're talking about right now in terms of whether it be the cross-section that you see in the upper left corner or kind of a modified version, this is very similar to what their own kind of policy statements and design guidelines would say that they're moving to in terms of the streets that they try to build. And so I think largely what we're trying to do is build a street that accommodates multiple users of that street. And I said this at the work session, that I understand kind of the cost portion of it, but I would also argue that this will probably be the last time we'd see a significant widening of Highway 16 in probably most, if not all, of our lifetime. So if you're asked what do you want, I certainly think that it's a prudent move to say here's what we want, and if we have to start working on a design that's more feasible, that could be built when you consider other factors, other communities, then certainly things can change if they need to change. But I think as a starting point, what we're trying to do is respond to what we've heard in our plans, respond to what the current thinking is on roadway design, and also put what we think is our best shot forward in a project-based decision where this will probably be, like I said the last time, this road gets widened in probably our lifetimes. And so that's not an exaggerated statement. I think
okay, just one final thing. So if we decide to go with, say, option 2,
sure,
right now, which is an option, and we go back and we say we voted for option 2, and then they come back and they give us, you know, the other additional costs and factors that are in place that we then would have to be responsible for as a town to pay. So now, how much time do we have to change from option 2 if we said, okay, that's going to be too much, we want to do option 1? I mean, is there a time frame, or are we now in option 2 and we can adjust it slightly, or we can change it completely?
Yeah, so I don't, to my knowledge, there aren't kind of rigid timelines and dates that you have to hit, because if you recall, they originally asked us for this information before Thanksgiving, so that already represents a certain amount of kind of flexibility in the schedule from their perspective. So I don't think it's maybe that kind of structured in terms of when they want to hear from us. I suspect a good time to provide that feedback is after you have the cost information. Once you have the cost information, I think as soon as the board deems fit to respond to NCDOT and say that, hey, this is either in line with what our expectations are, or it's out of line with what our expectations are, I think they'll hear that feedback and adjust their plans accordingly. Again, no decision tonight forces or locks you into anything kind of forever. It really is giving NCDOT something that they can start to initiate their design.
Well,
So
the one thing it does lock us into, though, is if we did one, they're going to come back with a design with one, and they're not going to go back and redesign it for 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's a fair statement, absolutely.
All right.
Okay, so just one more question then. So if we then were to go with option 2, and we go to the, I just need it for clarity, and we go to them and we say, okay, we're going with design option 2 for this, moving forward, okay? And then they come back with the costs and whatever's involved, but we've shot for the moon, okay, which we may not get. So we could get a variation of option 2 as opposed to being totally locked into option 1, but no decision would be made, or before a decision could be made, you would then have to come back to the board for us to vote on what's going to happen monetarily for anything, if it's option 1 or option 2.
So if it's option 2, yeah, absolutely. If it's option 1, which is kind of the baseline, I'm not sure I follow.
So option 2, then we could not jump up to a different option and want more. Option 1, I mean, we couldn't move up. Option 2, we have the option of changing or moving down or adjusting.
Jumping up to another option, I think, would be very difficult to do. I think moving down to a lower option would be much easier to do.
Mr. Burrow?
Yes. I'll start out by saying I do support option 2. And I think when I hear, I did participate in the Route 16 corridor study, and I did participate in the comprehensive plan development and a few other plans that have gone on in the town. And you know, yes, the biggest thing that people want us to consider is transportation congestion. And if we're splitting hairs between 450,000 and 151,000, shame on us. The other thing is, this is just a concept. And it's going to be impacted by physical things. I mean, when you get to Kensington, Cuthbertson, and Providence Road, I've asked Dennis this question before, and he said that there's room to get our option 2 through there. But you never know. There are going to be places that we have to adjust it. And the comment that you made tonight, yeah, this is we're at conceptual stage, and you may have a median right in front of your house, and you may have to make a right turn, go down, and make a U-turn and come back. This is a very preliminary stage, and you won't know how this is going to turn out until such time as they get to the next stage, which is not final working drawings yet. It's going to be an intermediary stage. And when at that stage, they're going to start putting numbers to it. And yes, then we'll have to make decisions again. But that's how it all progresses.
Yeah.
So this is the starting point, as you've said.
Yeah.
And DOT recognizes that because
Yeah.
they admitted it at the meeting that they basically said, we can't give you cost information because we have to go price the right-of-way and things like that, so.
Are we
So,
in
I'm still
general
talking.
discussion, or
Excuse
are
me.
we just asking Dennis questions?
We're asking
Sorry.
questions.
Okay.
Excuse me, I was still talking. I wasn't finished yet. The other part of this is, and I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, ask your question.
So are we done with questions so we can have a general discussion?
Yeah.
Okay, so,
I lost my train of thought.
go ahead.
I have no more questions for you. I do have general discussion points. I'm concerned about this footprint, just like you had talked about. We're going to have bike lanes, then we're not going to have bike lanes, then we're going to have bike lanes. Where do we think these cyclists are going when they're not on a bike lane? They're either in the road or they're on the sidewalk. Well, if they're in the road, then why isn't that enough? I mean, we're not talking about transportation cycling. We are not talking about people who are cycling up to work on this stretch of they're not going into town on this bike. The bike, that's too far and the lane doesn't go there. They're not cycling down into downtown because the bike lane won't go that far. So they're cycling in a small area And then if we have option 2 with the multi-use path, safety is a concern for me. I mean, as I said, my youngest just turned 4 today. He got his big boy bike, and there is no way that I'm going to put him on that thing and be trying to teach him to bike with his training wheels up beside Providence Road. That does not feel safe to me. I don't see a lot of people with tiny children wanting to use that multi-use path for that. Maybe there are. That's just not what I would feel safe doing. I'm also concerned, I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with Commissioner Burrell. It is not shameful to split hairs over several hundred thousands of dollars. It is our job. This is not our money. This is your money. This is the people's dollar, and it's our job to account for every penny of it. We have to respect you enough to do that, to treat it like every penny, every dollar matters. And we're talking about options here that could be $100,000, $200,000, $400,000 apart in cost. That is significant. It's your tax dollars that could have been used somewhere else. We know that we have a residential heavy tax base here. We know that that means we have limited money. We know that we lose money on every dollar because of that tax base. So we can't always afford everything we want. It's easy to want, but what do we need? It's easy to talk about what we would love to have, but we've all sat through conversations asking, okay, but if we do X, Y, Z, are we going to have to raise taxes? Are we going to have to cut services? Are we going to have to get rid of some of our festivals? How do we make these cost analysis work for us? And when we talk about an option that seems to me to be very, very nice, but serve a lesser need, that could be hundreds of thousands of dollars difference, that could open a park for this town that we're asking for, that people are asking us for on a daily basis. That could supply other needs for this town that people are asking us for on a daily basis. And so I have to be very concerned on how we spend. We should be nickeling and diming ourselves. This isn't our money to spend. This is something we should be paying very special attention, very carefully accounting for everything. And I'm very nervous about committing ourselves to this level of money for something that I see as very pleasant, but I don't see as having the need for this town.
So, hang on a second. Could you provide a clarification question? Even though option 1 says 0 bike lanes, it's wide enough, and in my understanding, at least is the explanation I got from Marvin, if you request them to paint the bike lane, it's wide enough for it to be there for the experienced cyclist. Is that correct, or do they have that wrong?
I think they may have a little inaccurate. I think what NCDOT would typically do is build a wide outside lane.
Right.
So maybe the inside lane would be 11 or 12 feet. The outside lane would be 13 or 14 feet. A bike lane, which my understanding is NCDOT would actually pay for the asphalt for the bike lane if requested. They wouldn't pay for the right-of-way needed for the in-pavement bike lane. Is typically a 5-foot exclusive piece of asphalt that's painted for cyclists. So it's not the 1 or 2 feet of asphalt that you would see for a wide outside lane.
Okay.
But that would allow sharing the road options.
Yes. Yeah. I just wanted the clarification on the Commissioner Burrow.
Yes. Okay. What my problem with option 1 tonight is that it closes the door right now on anything else that we may want to do. Going with option 2 does not. We're going to be presented with facts. We're going to be presented with dollars, and we will have the opportunity to go ahead or not go ahead. And I think I just don't want to close the door at this point. I want to keep our options open. I want to give Dennis, Greg, and anybody else, that are involved, to have the opportunity to negotiate this and come up with a consistent plan all the way through. And whether it's 5-foot sidewalks or 6-foot sidewalks, those things will be handled as you move forward with the negotiations and the final designs.
Okay.
Commissioner Westlake, and then we'll...
First of all, my interpretation from what you said earlier was that even if all the municipalities are choosing different options, it's going to be a consistent plan developed by DOT, correct? I mean, they're not going to make, I'm sure the engineers do not make it all look choppy the whole way, is that?
Yeah, I don't, what gets built's not going to be choppy.
Yeah.
I think they're going to force the hand for folks to work together and figure out what they want along.
Right, so it makes
consistent.
more sense for us to ask for what we want as opposed to, you know, what's going to necessarily look consistent at this point. That's my opinion, my interpretation of that. The other thing is I don't see that as splitting hairs between 300,000, because when I see how much it costs to put in roads and what our citizens are asking for is relief from the traffic nightmare that we have and are going to have. When we were at the COG meeting, we were told that by 2050, we should see an increase in population equal to 2 Raleighs and 1 Charlotte. That's how many people are coming here. We have to be forward-thinking and plan for the future. And as Dennis said, this is probably our last opportunity to get this widened on Providence. So $300,000 in the big picture for the future is not a lot of money when we're talking about roads. And that's my opinion on it.
Commissioner Burns?
I'm still looking at the financial part. So we're talking about 4 lanes for option 1, 2, and 3.
Correct.
We're talking about
With the median.
a sidewalk on each side, whether it's 5 feet on each side with option 1, option 2, 5 feet on one side, or with a different,
Sure.
with a shared path on the other side. Haven't even looked at option 3. That's kind of out of the question. So when I'm looking at this money-wise and tax dollar-wise, I don't think it's closing the door, but I think that just from people that I've talked to, which is quite a few, and things that we've read, all of us have read, and information coming in, is how are we spending the people's tax dollars? And the 5 people on this board have to raise their hand and say yay or nay. I'm going to spend maybe $800,000 or I'm going to spend $200,000 to get 4 lanes and 2 sidewalks. I think what splitting hairs are, or what we're doing is there going to be a section for a bike lane? And how many people are going to use that bike lane when we're talking about traffic with 4 lanes and 2 sidewalks on each side? So I'm for option 1.
Pro Tem?
I share all of these concerns with the monetary amount, with the bike lane amount, with the median bump, all of that. But I'm trying to get to the place where, visually, down the line, with the monetary amount, we are not locking ourselves in. I just want to be clear with that. We are just putting an option out there to go and say, okay, this is going to be, if we vote for option 2, because we're shooting for, say, the moon. But we're not actually voting for the moon tonight. We're just shooting for the moon tonight. We're wishing.
So, kind of a couple of things.
Okay? For myself and maybe everyone, we're wishing for the moon,
So,
but we're not voting for the moon.
so couple of things. Maybe a few, actually. What the board's debating is not the cost of a bike lane. So I think that's the first thing. I think the cost difference between option 1 and option 2 is largely due to the shared use path and an additional foot of sidewalk along the 40% of the project frontage or the project limits. So it's not the bike lane. That's not what the board's debating. In terms of a commitment tonight, I don't think the board's committing anything tonight with any financial decision. So I just want to make sure that's
That's
clear.
a wish. We are wishing for, not commitment-wise, monetarily, we are just wishing for a better option than option 1, but we're not committing ourselves per se to option 2. We're just going back to them to say, okay, we want option 2, and they say yay,
Yeah,
nay,
you're-
or they come back with whatever the rest of the monetary plan is, and then you come back and you present that to us, and then we say if it is or is not too much, and then that's when we start moving forward.
That's when you have the ability to look at this and say whether or not option 2 is
Right.
still appropriate at
Right,
that
if we want
time,
to
or
move
if
forward
option
with that or not.
1 is appropriate, or whatever option is appropriate at that time. Yes.
Claire, can I ask for clarification? So, as you said, we're not talking about the bike lane, we're not talking about sidewalks, there's gonna be sidewalks, whether they're 5 feet or 6 feet. We're basically talking about, between these two options that we seem to be debating, the multi-use path.
That's primarily the cost differences that
Yeah.
you're seeing.
Well, when we ask, you know, to address your concern, you said, you know, traffic is a big concern. People are very concerned about that. Well, the multi-use path being there or not being there isn't gonna affect the traffic. There's gonna be 2 lanes north, 2 lanes south, any of these plans. That's
That's
correct?
correct.
I'm getting that right in my head?
That's
Okay.
correct.
I'm just making sure I understand what we're going through.
Okay, but as we talk about ways to control traffic, we have to encourage and have other options for people to get to where they need to go. This is where any type of, you know, if we talk about whether they ride bikes, whether or not they walk, I mean, all of that, when you make a town more pedestrian-friendly, that does help with traffic.
And there'll be sidewalks, no matter what we pick.
Okay, but they can also ride the bikes more safely, correct?
That's correct. Shared use path, correct.
So what they're asking for is, what option would you like that we would start a preliminary design with? That's in essence what they're asking.
Yes.
They came back with these costs because all the towns threw up their hands and said, well, what do they cost?
Right, we need to know
Right?
something.
But fundamentally, they're saying, where would you like us to start the design so we can come back with the cost estimate?
That is correct.
The one thing that I think everybody needs to understand, whether it happens or not, the reason Marvin is leaning towards option 2 is because they plan to build that into their trail system. That's why they're going with the multi-use paths. Come up, come down, and around. So they were looking at, we haven't even talked about that, but that's how they were looking at it. They were looking at the thread trail, but they don't have that yet. That's what they were looking at, because they have some other walkability challenges that we don't have. So every one of them looks at it differently that way.
So then again tonight, this is just basically to go back for them to come up with a design plan based upon what the municipalities have wished for on their wish lists,
That's correct.
but not anything that's committing us towards any option, because it may or may not be option 1, 2, or it might be something else, or something combined with them based upon what the municipalities come back with.
Yeah, so I think we're placing a lot of emphasis on the word commitment, so I want to use a different word and say that what it's doing, it's giving them guidance information from the different municipalities about how to start their preliminary design work, because they have to go through an environmental impact assessment, an environmental document, and in order for them to do that, which that's a required planning document that looks at the entire corridor and assesses environmental impacts, they have to know how wide of an envelope do they need to consider. And so that's what this design guidance that we're providing them is largely intended to help them figure out. From there, they'll be able to understand any environmental impacts. I'm sure they would have to make any sort of tweaks to their preliminary alignments or their preliminary design, quite frankly, based off of that. And once they get comfortable with the environmental piece, they will certainly start to look for a more consistent set of design guidance from the different municipalities and the county. Concurrently with their preliminary kind of design, the municipalities can be having conversations about, do we all have a consistent set of design guidance that we can land on. But I think design guidance is probably a better choice of words for me to use than commitment at this point.
Well,
Put it in perspective. This is probably, from a design standpoint, probably a multi-year process for them. I mean, you're talking a couple of years
Sure.
before they could even come back with.
Yeah, Yes.
you know, what it would look like, because they have so many variables to think through, correct?
Yeah, correct. So if you go back to the beginning of my presentation, I said 2021 is kind of an anticipated right-of-way acquisition year. So planning and design activities would be occurring over the next 2 years, year and a half, or however long it takes, however long that time frame is from today until 2021, to get a set of plans ready to then start talking to the affected property owners about what right-of-way needs are. So we're still quite a ways away from
A commitment.
any commitments. And again, 2025 is the real year for any sort of financial commitments, because that's when they would kind of do their project closeout and bookkeeping. That's when they would be asking for commitments.
So I use the term commitment because I don't want anyone to leave here tonight with the perception, regardless of how we vote, 1, 2, none, whatever, that we are in fact committing ourselves to any monetary amount at this point. We are only voting on an option for a design plan then moving forward. So it is not a commitment because we do not know what we are going to be committing to except a design option, with the possibility of the dollar amount being what it is, or it could change based upon what happens when you go back and they come together. So we're not committing to that dollar amount.
That's correct.
But we do know that option 1 is 151,000, and we do know that option 2 is 450,000,
The potential, if we were to go with that.
approximate.
Approximate.
Minimum. Plus right away.
Based off the information that they had at the time that we requested information, these are the numbers that we have. As the DOT gets better information, all 3 of those numbers are subject to change.
I'd venture to say that in 2020, 2021, whoever's sitting here is going to get a whole nother set of numbers up there that's going to shock the heck out of them.
I agree.
I mean, that's really what's going to happen here.
I agree.
So, what do we want to do with this?
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend to NCDOT that the typical cross-section used within the municipal limits of Waxhaw for the NCDOT Highway 16 widening project to be cross-section identified as option 1, as presented during the January 23rd, 2018 Board of Commissioners work session, which includes an approximate future cost to the town of Waxhaw of $151,000.
We have a motion for option 1. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? What are you? We have,
I just have questions.
so
But-
are you voting or not? Okay, I'm going to do the vote again, because
Do a vote again.
all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Can I ask a question?
We've
No.
called for the vote. No,
Okay.
I mean, so if you abstain,
Then I'll vote no. I can
so wait a minute, let me ask for the vote one more time. I'm going to call the vote one more time. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
For option 1.
For option 1,
Aye.
aye. All those opposed?
Now, did he say I could ask a question?
Are you opposed or not?
He's saying something.
No, I was going to say you should vote because you haven't been recused and there's no real basis. So you're supposed to vote in all matters unless there's a legal justification for you not to vote. I know it's kind of hard, but that's why they put the rules that way.
We've called the vote, so you need to vote. So one last time. All those in favor of option 1 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All those opposed signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Okay, the motion did not carry. So we haven't made a distinction yet. Do we have anything else?
Should I make another motion? Okay. I make a motion to NCDOT that the typical cross-section used within the municipal limits of Waxhaw for the NCDOT Highway 16 widening project be the cross-section identified as option 2, modified as presented by staff because it is consistent with the town's adopted corridor and comprehensive plans.
We have a motion on the table. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of option 2 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
So we have, all those, let's do the vote again, because you kind of mumbled. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed?
Nay.
So we have motion carried for option 2, 3 to 2. Let's take a quick 5-minute recess.
we're up to the resolution, yes?
Okay, now we are into new business. And I'd ask everybody to kindly find their seats, and Todd and Jim, if you would kind of sit down and join us here.
Shut up.
The next item up, we'll turn this over to Town Manager Ferguson. Consideration to adopt a resolution to support,
You can't, he's not here.
well, he'll get here in a minute, suspending parkland development and commitments until completion of a park master plan. Now, what we agreed to discussion that tonight it's about discussing the resolution, making any language adjustments so staff can make the adjustments and then bring it back to us in a couple of weeks. And so when Mr. Ferguson walks in, we'll all give him a round of applause. And, Chief, could you go find him? Okay. Well, Earl's, here comes Earl. And so we're 6.
You're up.
You're up. And this is about the resolution, and tonight it's about discussing and making any language adjustments. So without further ado, Manager Ferguson.
Before the retreat, the board discussed some language that would indicate to the residents and to the public at large that there would be what we call a timeout in some park development discussions until that time that the park master plan is updated. So staff has drafted a resolution that would indicate that there would be a timeout basically for discussions with outside parties that have not started or have not been committed to at this point. So if you have in front of you the resolution, I would highlight there's a couple sections there that are that apply. There are 2 sections that have therefore be it resolved, one of which basically says there are certain things that the board and staff won't be doing during that time period. But the second whereas, or be it therefore resolved, allows for 5 different areas where the town could move forward. So those are things basically that the town is committed to already, opens the door for certainly continued discussion with the YMCA, nonprofits, things that you've already initiated, or things that the board might initiate yourself that's not private development or outside party initiated. So the resolution as written does both those things, but we're certainly here to discuss it.
So just as a point of clarification, during the budget cycle, if we said we wanted to allocate X millions of dollars for the build out of the downtown park as a for instance, doesn't preclude us from doing that.
The resolution does not tie the hands of the board in any way.
All right.
Can I
Question?
Yeah, just
Commissioner
to
Lee.
clarify. So under now therefore be it resolved, it says the governing body of the town of Waxhaw that any future park recreation land development, we're not talking about developing the park's land as parks, are we?
The board is not precluded from doing any park development, so.
Even if it hasn't as yet, a proposal has not as yet come forward.
That's correct.
So a proposal could come forward next month for something for any of the parks, and we would have the right then to vote on it, allocate funds, what have you.
For a park.
For a park,
Yeah.
yes.
For park. I think what the resolution intent and actually does is says that the town is not going to be open to being approached by outside parties for development of properties that could be parks.
Okay, that's just, I just wanted to make sure I had that straight, because personally I'd like to see us open the Waxhaw Marvin Road Park and not sit on our hands. So I wanted to make sure that was still something we'd be able to discuss.
Yeah,
Okay.
the board certainly does not tie their hands in passing the resolution. The board absolutely could repeal the resolution, but the second part of be it further resolved clarifies that there are 5 areas where specifically it's outlined that this resolution does not apply.
Yeah, but my question wouldn't be answered by any of those, because it isn't about a recreational program, it isn't about existing facilities, it isn't about the YMCA, and the last one is about that it expires. So I'm making sure that we're not precluded from looking at those inactive park properties and working to make them active.
Yeah, so number 1, allocating funds in any budget for park land or recreation purposes of any kind, I think would address that.
Okay, just making sure we weren't just allocating the funds, we're allowed to spend them and move forward. Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
So the,
Commissioner Burns.
was the date still on here, the December date?
Nothing's changed.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
December, can that be indefinitely for the board? Rather than it expiring, if it expires December 28th, 2018, then the town can proceed and start talking to anyone that comes forward wanting to purchase park inventory.
That date could be adjusted to a date
Does there
further
have
down
to
the
be a
line.
date? Or can it say, Mayor, we,
I think
What-
one of the things that I suggested to Commissioner Burns was maybe instead of expiring, to bring it back before the board no later than December so for reevaluation, something like that, so we're always talking about it, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think the intent there was to try to put some timing component into getting the Park and Rec Master Plan done. But that date could be certainly a review date. So, I mean, you could have it, language that says that the board will review the resolution the first meeting in January or the last meeting in December, or language to that effect.
okay. I've had quite a few people call me in the past week or since Friday, since this came out. And just for clarification, during our retreat, we did discuss different options, but this seemed to be the one that we all kind of had a consensus on. But the whole reason for doing this is pretty simple. We have park inventory property that we want, and the people have said they want to protect from any type of outside development, sale, exchange, swap, whatever. We want to keep our property intact. And I'm hoping that that's what I'm believing, that this is what this does. Because it's pretty simple. We don't want to sell our park property. So if that's the intent, that is the intent of this, and that is what all of this is saying, then I'm okay with it. So that is what this is doing.
Yeah, that absolutely is the intent that the staff heard at the retreat, which is the board wanted to basically preclude the approach from outside parties coming to the town and making pitches for use of town-owned property, whether they're currently listed as park properties or not park properties, but this would preclude that until the master plan is finished and that step is completed.
And one more clarification. We keep saying until the master plan is finished. Going forward with the master plan, in my mind, and the reason for the master plan is to get to a point where we have guidance and we have recommendations to look at all of our parkland and what we need to do and some guidance in what to do, not as an excuse when it comes to the park plan is done and you look at it and say, oh, well, we don't need this in this part because we want to do it in this part, then we can just go ahead and sell this. That's not what I'm looking at as the park master plan, the purpose.
Yep.
I think
Is
that
that a question towards Greg, though?
Yes.
Yes,
Oh.
okay.
So the resolution doesn't in any way address the outcome of the park master plan or what the intent of the park master plan might be, or even what the board could or should do at the end of the park master plan. I think that certainly is something, as we enter into the update, that the board can certainly provide feedback as to what your goals to the final outcome are. But ultimately, the board will have to make decisions as to town properties, and this resolution doesn't contemplate any outcome one way or another about what those decisions might be in the future. The park master plan then is certainly a guideline for the board as you move forward, but it also does not tie your hands or a future board's hands.
And that's the main thing, because during the retreat also, the Parks and Rec director made the statement that the master plan would give us the opportunity, when it's finished, to go for grants, large grants, that would be very impactful to getting parks open. And it would protect the property if we got those grants for 50, 75 years. Is that correct, Dina?
That's correct. Depending on the type of grant, those grants come with strings, and certainly a part of the grant, which is a state grant, I believe as Dina indicated, is a 50-year term.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to protect park property and you want to create a long-lasting legacy, that's one way to do it. Just as a note, those are very competitive grants. And there's no guarantee that the first year we apply, we would be awarded, nor the second year. But those, certainly without an updated park and rec master plan, the number of points that you receive are going to be diminished, and the competitive nature of the grant is going to be very low. So in order to put the town in the best position to be competitive, the recommendation certainly has been to get that plan updated, be as comprehensive as possible, and then if we're so fortunate to have a part of grant, it certainly would have that effect on the property that's awarded as far as tying it up for a long period of time.
One more thing. Since we don't have a deadline, so it's up to the board. As long as this is in place, it's up to the board, our board or the next board. Board changes every 2 years. So what would be the reasoning for not doing a preservation easement to protect the property in perpetuity? That we wouldn't even need this anymore.
So I think there's a legal question there, and I think there's a financial question and perhaps a practical question. So that'd be three different categories. I would defer to the town attorney on the legal part of it, which is I think his answer is going to be you can do that. It's legal to put a conservation easement on a piece of property. The second question there is, would you want to do that, and what are the implications? We've not come fully prepared to go through every implication, but I can tell you from a financial side, if we're going in a future time and place to have debt to develop the park, a bank might require equity, and so anything that's done to impede or impact the title of a piece of property could somewhat diminish the value of the property. So if the property there's an appraisal for the property and there are title issues or there are deed restrictions or certain things that encumber the property, in essence, the town may have diminished the value of the property. That's not to say that the town would consider selling it on the open market, but the value certainly can be diminished by action that the board might take. So just off the top of my head, that would be one reason that you might consider not doing it. The other is you might also want to find out the parameters of grants and what the competitive nature of those grants are before placing a deed restriction on a piece of property. It might have a positive impact, but it might have a negative impact. So I think those would be things you'd want to research just from two market financial aspects of it, but those are off the top of the head.
Correct me if I'm wrong, on the 34 acres, which is where this came up, right now that's sitting as a planned use development, which would require rezoning with a minimum of 29 acres of parkland in that development. So we would have to do some form, before we can start applying easements, we would have to go through a rezoning? Yes, no? Because there's very specific requirements placed on that property right now, one of which is a 29-acre park.
There are restrictions. You might could still put easements, but the easements should not conflict with the existing zoning, and the existing zoning, as you're alluding to, a portion of it does allow for houses, because all of it is not preserved for parkland. So there are a multitude of considerations. Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted clarification on that.
So we have one minor language change at this point, which is basically instead of saying it automatically expires, it would be reviewed either the last meeting of the year or the first meeting of the new year. You can check into that. Other comments about the language, et cetera? So with that, would you factor that in and bring it back at the next meeting then?
I think from the discussion, if we simply struck the item or number 5, the resolutions automatically expire, then that does not give an expiration date, and it simply then provides a procedure for the board to repeal it. And we would strike that automatic expiration date there and clean that language up. So.
Okay. Very good. Pretty okay with that? Okay.
I just need some clarification on that. So if we're not having an expiration date and we're not going to be revisiting it, we're not giving a date to revisit it, so basically we would just have to bring it up again if we wanted to
Basically says we'd have to take action to repeal it.
repeal it.
Instead of continually looking at it, when we get a plan or we get whatever, you'd have to take an action to repeal it, that's all. So you'll bring that back next meeting? Okay.
will.
Very good. New business number 2, resolutions to authorize the establishment of brokerage accounts and securities custodian account. Ms. Lisa White, Finance Director.
Good evening. I'm Lisa White, Finance Director. Just a historical, the town has held most of its available cash in a local bank in a checking account, primarily making very low interest rate. However, the state statutes allow local governments to invest their idle cash in a variety of securities. The Treasurer's Office monitors all investments of local governments, and there's very strict regulations of what you can and can't invest in. With that, I would like to ask that the board approve 2 brokerage accounts so that I could have some competitive selections of securities, and also a third-party custodial account for the safekeeping of securities that we would buy. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? I have one.
Sure.
What does sufficiently liquid mean?
Good question. There are some securities, like commercial paper, that are very short-termed. You can get them for 30 days. So you would want to make sure you structured your portfolio so that you don't have everything in 3 years or something like that. So you don't want to have it all long-term. You want to make sure, based on our cash flow, how our cycles go. As you know, we get most of our money in December and January, so right now we have a lot of cash, so we could have some investments now, but then as we get into August and October, we're not going to have much cash, so we need to have our investments maturing then so that we have cash flow. So liquidity is just so that you have your cycles of cash and you make sure that you're not tying them all up all the time.
Do we have to keep a minimum that is sufficiently liquid? Does the LGC weigh in on that or anything like that?
No, they don't.
Okay.
What they do, what the Treasurer's Office does is look, we have to report our investments every 6 months. The Treasurer's Office looks at them and makes sure that we are investing in the safe securities that are allowed in the statute and that we're in compliance with the statute. So they don't look at your liquidity necessarily. That's just if you're not liquid, you're not going to be able to pay your bills. So I'll be looking at your liquidity.
Any other questions, comments, motions?
Motion to approve. Let me find the wording here. Where's the wording? Motion to approve the proposed resolutions authorizing the establishment of accounts with Morgan Stanley, BB&T, and First Citizens as presented.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you, Lisa. I guess she wanted to get away quick. All right, final item of new business. Appointments to volunteer boards and commissions. Ann Simpsons.
Good evening, Mayor Mara and Commissioners. Tonight, as Vice Chair of the Organization Advisory Committee, we'd like to submit for your consideration our applicant recommendations to fill the board and committee for the town of Waxhaw. We do have one change on that. Miss Anna Blood has withdrawn her application because she's running for Union County Commissioner.
Well, we're not considering the OAB tonight.
Oh, okay. But in case, because she also had applied for other positions as well. But before you begin your deliberation tonight, I just want to take a few minutes and share with you the process that our board goes through to make these recommendations. So out of these 8 vacancies, we reviewed 60 applications from 21 candidates. The candidates can apply for up to 3 boards, and we refined our application process to have applicants select the top 3 positions that they like, and this way it helps us to identify their area of interest, because if we wouldn't want somebody to apply for Parks and Rec, but they were interested in planning board activities. As the OAB members, we work with town staff and board and committee chairmen, and we determine what their needs are for their board or their particular committee. So in this instance, just to give you an example, we had spoken with Parks and Recreation, and we understand that their biggest need right now for their committee is finance, and to find grant writers and to do research to find funds to help fund the parks. After that, we use that criteria to narrow down our pool of candidates to select from and create a short list. We contacted 11 applicants. 2 were unable to commit at this time, and 1 withdrew their application. Well, actually, now we have 2. The OAB members, we interviewed all the applicants. We held our hearing on February 5th to determine a consensus for our recommendations, and 7 out of the 8 vacancies we have put forth for you. Since this time, we actually also had 2 resignations on our particular board too. And I just want to finish up by really taking a moment to acknowledge and recognize how wonderful of the amount of citizens we have. We have a really diverse skill set and knowledge of citizens that reside here in Waxhaw, and so it really has helped us to select the best people to help you with your decisions. Boards.
Okay, discussion. The only comment that I would make as we move forward, I would like to see in the future more of a balance and mix across the whole town. This slate of candidates is all from the Cuthbertson-Kensington corridor north, and just as an observation, I just happened to notice because I looked at the slate and then looked at their addresses. We need to really look at making sure we have balance across the town.
Just to address that, though, we were really matching the skill sets with the needs of the boards and committees. So some of the boards and committees that do have residency requirements, we make sure they're within the town municipality. But other than that, I mean, we kind of really look at their skill set. I mean, even for us, I don't even look at who it is who's applying as much as matching what the needs are of that particular board and committee.
Yeah, I understand that. I think a planning board, as a for instance, needs to be represented from across the entire town, because we have different zoning and uses across the entire town. That's all. If we need to help you lobby for more applicants to make sure we have more of a representative, then I think you need to ask us to help with that. But that's just an observation. I'm not being critical as much as you go forward, look at it that way. So. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, motions? No emotions, just motions. Yeah.
I do have one question.
Yes.
If we make a motion, because the slate, as we're showing it right now, still shows the OAB that we're not going to.
And you just say accept.
Excluding,
the OAB. Yeah,
okay.
Excluding and accept.
Then I make a motion that we accept the slate of candidates, excluding the 2 for the OAB as listed in the agenda.
Okay, we have a motion on the table from Commissioner Lee. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it, 5-0. And with that, if someone would like to make a motion to adjourn, I would be willing
Motion
to
to
accept
adjourn.
the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.